We are increasingly unable to hold two truths at one time. Yes, there are bad police and there are good police. There is systemic racism and there are people fighting against it. There are some good things in critical race theory and there might be some things that you disagree with. That doesn't mean you throw the whole thing out.
100%.
You know what I mean? They have to have just one thing and it has to be perfect, and that's unrealistic.
You know, for me, a football coach was always about inciting violence, revving up passion, like conductors of testosterone, like all this like toxic bullshit that like had nothing to do with strength or being strong. Natalie did not have to become more masculine to be a football coach, and I think that's beautiful. She had to just be exactly who she was. She's got this unbelievable, like quiet, steady, unbending conviction. There's a clarity and a peace of mind there that I think just makes her real as fuck. Oh, well, look, I get in trouble because I never do like a proper introduction,
okay,
but I want,
so,
look, you're gonna see very quickly. I'm not Walter Cronkite. I sure as fuck ain't Marv Albert. I ain't biting anybody. But when I look at you and your career, head of diversity and inclusion community at one of the most prestigious, I guess that's a word for it, private schools in the country. You were a science teacher and administrator in the DC public school system for what, like 10 years?
I taught for 11.
11 years. Head football coach of Calvin Coolidge High School, which at the time made you the only female varsity football coach in the country at the time. Women's professional football player for the DC Divas for 6 seasons.
Yep.
You were the Title IX administrator for DC Sports. You got a full ride to Virginia to run track. You were all ACC at UVA. Look, I think what we try to do with this show, when I looked at that, I mean, I know who you are, and we've known each other our whole lives. I don't know, I was really just like staggered by your accomplishments. I was talking to my dad about it this morning, and I think just like in a world right now that is so concerned with optics and with self-promotion, when I look not only what you have done, but how you have done it, and I feel like I have some real insight to how you have done it. You're one of those people who have really walked the walk, not just talk that shit. And that's kind of like what this show is really about. And I'm trying to think of my first memories of you. Like, I remember you as the girl.
Kid.
Well, I remember you as the girl that Nick had the crush on, because Nick would always talk about that. That's what I remember from like way back in the day. Yeah. But what are like some old Sidwell memories?
You guys were like the jocks, right? You were the fucking like popular dudes on campus. All the girls loved Garrett's eyes. It's funny that he said something about Garrett's eyes. I remember all the girls talking about like, and you played football. Did you play basketball?
No, I played baseball.
You played baseball,
Yeah.
And then Nick played basketball, football, and baseball. And y'all were like the guy. I was kind of tomboyish, so like I really loved like playing football with everybody. Playing basketball over here all day. That I needed that part of my childhood to kind of get where I think where I am now. But I was also very shy at Sidwell. Like I didn't, I was super, super, super shy.
I mean, I will say, like, when I first heard that you were like coaching varsity football, I was like, dang, like now, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I do remember you as like, I mean, I don't really look at it. I just remember like soft-spoken, always kind, always.
I was not confident. Like, it's so weird now, people are like, oh my God, you're so badass. Like, how do you like confidence? I'm like, I was not. Like, you got to fake it till you make it.
Wow.
And that really was.
And where did that come? Did that come, like, did playing football? Is that where
Playing helped. Playing football definitely helped with teaching. And then, but, it's different when the world is like looking, I mean, I wanted to blend into the floor paint sometimes. Like,
because it wasn't about that for you. It was about the players. It was about the work.
Yeah, it was during that time where I had no time to think about what the world thought of me. You know what I mean? And it's not until now, reflecting this far out, seeing what they've become, still being in touch with them and having them be a really major part of my life, that I'm recognizing oh, okay. Through the coaching thing, you know, my dad had already died. And that was craziness. And I could call your dad and he would answer in the middle of a meeting and be like, someone just asked about my life rights. I don't know what that is, you know? And like, he coached me through that in terms of the attention and just knowing like if shit goes down, like I could call Mr. Bernthal and he'll pick up.
And I think that's something, you know, like I think, you know, I saw that so much with my circle of friends, guys who were in trouble with the law. If you were like, you could always kind of, and, you know, we had this, you know, not when we were living here, but even in the old, like we had this like open door, open heart policy that I think we all kind of grew up with, that if you were part of the family, you were part of the family. I mean, even like we got robbed like 6 times. My dad refused to lock the doors. And I was like, I mean, one time a dude came in right while I was sleeping on the kid, and I never really understood that. And my dad was like, well, if somebody really needs this shit that bad, they should. And you know, I'm not like that. Like, you come into my house, I'm gonna shoot the shit out of you. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not, you know, but like he had that attitude. And I think it led to this kind of, you know, they were foster parents. I mean, just the other day while I was here, I was walking on the Billy Goat Trail, and this little girl, I walked by this girl and I was like trying to keep my head down because I'm trying to go on my run. And she was like, Jon Bernthal. I was like, hey, how you doing? You know, and she was like, your mom was my foster mom. And it was like this little girl kissing me. She's like, yeah, they saved me and my brother's life. You know, so, you know, and I sent that picture of my mom and it made her life. And like, you know, bringing people in your home and being there sort of for life. I know that you've done that with your students, you know, and you continue to do that. Who is your role model to do that? Where did you learn that?
I think I learned it from my dad.
How so?
And, you know, my father, he had that physical therapy practice in Northeast. And after he died, you know, I realized his finances were a mess. And then, but reflecting, he let people pay him in chickens for physical, you know what I mean? Like, they literally could come with whatever they had and he would treat them. And he, you know, going to a school like Sidwell and the privilege that we all had, you know, obviously I did come from Northeast to cross the park, but my father let me know, like, yeah, you might not live in Potomac, but you're still privileged as shit. And you need to both remember where you come from and understand that everybody is a human being and you treat people as such. And just watching him care for people, for whoever it was, it didn't matter who it was. He just cared for people. And then having that reinforced with, just like you said, our relationship at Sidwell, like, you know, with you guys. And it's just like, okay, well, kid needs a ride home. Duh. You know, kid needs some money. No, don't think twice about it. And just my goal, especially with them, during that time where it was so crazy with the media attention, I was like, this is their high school experience. Yeah, this is a story.
With your football players.
Yeah, like, but this is their high school experience that they're going to remember for their whole life. That was always just putting them first in everything that I did and every decision that I made. And then just understanding the reality of my situation. I was young, had no kids, like all I have is a dog. Like, I have the time, I have the space. You know, in some cases I had the money to do whatever they needed. So why not? What am I gonna do? Say no?
You know, I don't know about you, but I think that like growing up in DC, when we did, I always just found there was this unbelievable kind of in your face contradiction / hypocrisy, because you had this city center that was always, you know, so clean and so monitored and watched, and the real city was something really different. And then I really felt that, you know, going to the school that we went to, and these claims of diversity and inclusion. How do you look at that?
I look at it as there's hypocrisy and contradiction in everything. And, you know, my boss now, head of school, Brian, he gave us this book about managing polarities. And there's not, for many things, for many complex problems, there's not a one answer, one solution.
Sure.
It's a polarity to manage. And sometimes it swings this way and you've got to correct to bring it the other way. And then sometimes it swings all the way over here and you've got to constantly correct. And I think life is like that. Life is complex. And, you know, the socioeconomic dynamic, the racial dynamic, they're complex things. They're complex and unique in DC. And Sidwell it's a great place. It's an exclusive place. But I will say, like, the steps that I see the school taking, it's a totally different school than when we were there.
Yeah.
Right? And that makes me feel good. They completely trust in me and my leadership and my vision. They've thrown money at it, which, that lets you know that they're serious. But it'll always be a contradiction. Like the kids now, you know how we were. We raged against everything. And Sidwell kind of led it. And one thing Baratunde said when he talked to the kids was like, we were shitting on this school, and the school gave us a platform with which to do so.
Straight up.
And the kids now are like, oh, it's a contradiction between Quakerism and, all this elitism. And it's like, you're going to see that wherever you go, sweetheart. Like, people who have money are going to do the best for their children.
Yeah.
And they're not going to just put their children in a bad situation just because.
Right.
They're going to use that money to provide for their kiddos.
Yeah, but it gets complicated when people start saying what's good for your children, what's bad for your children, you know what I mean? And when someone says, hey, you need to be around this kid, that you can learn so much from this kid because he grew up so differently than you and he's seen so many different things. I'm interested in what you're talking about the polarities, because that's also just something, it's one of the reasons why we're doing this show. I think the folks with platforms right now, and what you're hearing is you're just hearing a whole bunch of whining and screaming and yelling by one side, and then a bunch of whining and screaming.
I think one thing they taught us well at Sidwell is the discourse, right? We sat around and we discussed. Like, there was not much lesson plan. We we sat in English class in a circle and went at it.
Yeah.
And just that skill of questioning things and not accepting things without, well, why is it this way? And I took that into teaching, and, I was in science. So my goal was that the kids, like, I want you to learn how to figure shit out.
Yeah.
I want you to learn how to question things.
Yeah. How you do that?
Just give them a problem and say, go. And then they hated it too. What was the answer? I don't know. Figure it out.
Yeah.
And then they get used to that, and they get used to that vulnerability of not knowing. Humans don't like to not know.
Straight up.
And I think that's where these factions that we see now, because everybody is pitching their solution to it all or their reason, and nobody is comfortable in the complicated mess. And the complicated mess is where it happens. That's where you have to live.
Yeah.
Having a discussion with someone who disagrees with you and really listening to their point. You probably won't agree. That's fine. You might not come out agreeing, but you're sitting in that mess.
You got to be hungry for that.
You got to be
hungry for that person you disagree with.
Exactly. And then people don't do that enough. And I think.
But what's the enemy of that? Like, what's the enemy of that? Is it emotion? Because that's what I think, like, and there's obviously, there's all this other stuff I want to talk to you about. Fear, there's like cancel culture, and like you don't want to say something to get offended.
It's fear and comfort. I think fear and comfort are the enemy of the sweet spot in the complicated mess, because we don't want to be in the mess, and that's why, like, the other thing I like to read about is the brain. Like, your brain makes up shit in your field of vision. Like, you're not seeing it as it is. Like, you have blind spots and your brain fills that in.
Sure.
Our brains don't want to not know. And so now, in a world where you can find whatever you want to find on YouTube and go down whatever rabbit hole pleases you, and you never have to be confronted with someone who disagrees with you, other than through, on the TV screen. And you can vilify them, and you can, Twitter at them, and all of those things, and you never have to really be confronted with any mess. And so people get comfortable. And I think, living in the mess takes some intentionality, and it's hard. And that's what, that's where a lot of my work is at Sidwell. There's a view that has been nurtured in our brains unconsciously sometimes for decades, because they are seen, the only Black boys you see on TV are doing drugs or in a gang or wherever. And so you look at them differently. And that's that systemic racism piece, right? Like, the systemic barriers that people of color have had in this country are to blame, not the people. The people themselves in a bad situation, it's not because they're lazy, it's not because, they're not smart. It's because there's a barrier there, and there's generational barriers that nobody can overcome. you need people with different perspectives.
Yeah.
Because you have kids. We have 54% students of color now at Sidwell Friends. So you have kids walking through that door that come from different backgrounds, have different identities.
I consider myself a liberal and progressive person. The thing that I rub up against is what I call, or what I look at as like this racist, classist element of the liberal progressives that I see all the time, and that I really found kind of growing up with. And like, look, I mean, I can tell you that one of the people that I've learned the most from in this world is a man named Alfred Brown from Shreveport, Louisiana, who I will put up there wisdom-wise. I'll put him up there with anyone. He got a life in prison sentence. The FBI agent that put him away said had he been born in any other community, this dude would have been Bill Gates. And I like, my life is richer, I'm smarter, I'm better because I got to know him. And I think for me, you know.
And that's that systemic barrier. Had he been born in any other zip code.
Straight up, straight up. That being said, he wasn't, right? And what I found that at some point in my childhood, there was an active effort. And I credit Mr. Williams. As much as Mr. Williams scared the shit out of me, and all the times I went to his office, and you know, he was a serious dude, man. And I was not like the, you know, he meant trouble to me. But you know, I really believe that what Mr. Williams knew is that not only could he do amazing things for these young men, but he was serving our entire community by not just saying, hey, we need more Black students, we need more Asian students, we need more. It wasn't about that. It was diversity in every way, and like how the whole is served that way. And
also what he did for you, Jon, you were scared of him.
Straight
he
up.
was a smart, strong person.
Straight up.
And he was a Black man.
Straight up. Straight up.
And you got to know that Black men can be that at a very young age.
For sure.
And that is also why diversity and inclusion is so important. Because if you don't see people in those roles, then it becomes an anomaly for people. It becomes like, oh, and you don't know what to do with that. But you got that early. You got to see this smart-ass Black man.
Straight up.
Scare the shit out of you.
Straight up.
And you had respect for him.
100%.
Right?
Yes, I think that's right. I guess, and I don't really know. I guess like my question about it though is like, where does it work? Where does it not work?
I think it works. What I try to do with the hiring thing is that like we need multiple perspectives to see the problem. If you look at the problem from one direction, look at the elephant all from the back, you're just going to see an elephant's ass. You're never going to see the trunk.
Sure.
People's perspectives are shaped by their experiences. Their experiences are shaped by their multiple and intersecting identities. So as a Black woman, I'm going to have a different perspective than Quinn as a Black man or you as a white man. And in order to solve this problem, we need to look at it from all the different angles. It doesn't mean I'm any less qualified. I'm just as qualified.
100%.
But, you know, and that's where our mind shift has to happen. It's like you're looking for a qualified person just the way you look for somebody that has a degree in this particular, you know, journalism or whatever, because you're hiring them for a magazine job. You need somebody with this particular perspective. You know, that's a hiring criteria. And so that's that part. And where I think it works in that, again, the data shows you solve complex problems faster. Scientific discoveries are made much quicker by diverse teams than they are by homogeneous teams. And then I think where you have to be careful though is about the mess we were talking about earlier. People get so like the whole liberal white thing, and that's hard to deal with because then you've got to this person who really thinks they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
I have to explain why you're not doing that thing. And then there's also like, explain that racism that's hidden underneath there, even toward me.
Yeah. I'm a white man in Hollywood right now, believe me. Like every time I get into a room with just white men, they want to tell me how there's no rules for white men and it's hard out there for I'm like, yo, motherfucker, like you are out of your fucking mind. But it's the same with the Me Too shit. You know, like there was a time when the Me Too was coming on. Like I'd be with a group of actors. The second we were alone as all men, they'd be like, yo, man, I hope I don't get caught up. I'm like, y'all are janky. You say young Black men were always portrayed as like gang members or stuff like that. Let me tell you something, man. There's a lot of gang members in this country for some reason. A lot of these guys played the cards that they dealt a lot of these guys grew up in areas of complete power vacuums where it was unsafe, and these guys banded together and provided safety for their community.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of these young men, the ingenuity, the organization, the creativity, the loyalty, the care that it takes to sort of run a neighborhood, whether illegal or legal in these abstract fucking means.
But nobody's telling that
That's not getting celebrated at all. It's not getting, there's nobody illuminating that.
Right.
And to me, when you talk about media, we talk about motorcycle gangs, the Italian mafia, man, honor among thieves. Like these dudes, like we love that shit. It's glorified like fuck. Cowboys, Peaky Blinders. But you talk about black street gangs and they're savages.
Yep.
They're reckless. They're all over the place. And for me, it's like, this isn't just, this is not just about race.
That's so old, Jon.
What's so old?
That paradigm, or that discrepancy of, Quinn and I were just talking about James Baldwin the other day or yesterday, and like he used to say it, like when white people revolt and fight the power, it's a revolution. When black people do it, they're savages or whatever.
Straight up.
I'm saying the quote wrong, but like that is an old thing, and that is from, and what I've learned, the history that we didn't learn is, that pervasive bit of slavery and why race was created to maintain the institution of slavery. Slavery was bad in order to make it, but it's lucrative.
Straight up.
In order to make it worth or make it justifiable, these people are savages. So they deserve to be enslaved. And so you create those stories, and those stories are old. The story of the black savage, the story of the dangerous black man, those are old stories.
And being perpetuated.
Right. Those are old, those are ingrained. Those are internalized by even black people.
Yep.
All of this is mess, and it's not necessarily to be cleaned up. We have to live in this mess in order to have a diverse society. All these problems are, the more diverse you have, the more clashes within diverse groups you're gonna have.
Of course. It's really simple for me, and like the way that I'm raising my kids. Any force that pushes people apart, that plays against the intrinsic human need to come together with people, understand with people, compromise with people, that to me is just like the enemy. One of my main reasons I really wanted to do this podcast, it really started with like one specific thing, and that was, after George Floyd, during the protests and during the movement, I, like so many people, was, obviously just completely horrified and terrified and outraged by, what I saw. And, it was at a time when, I had already lost my cousin to COVID. Dougie's father had already died from COVID. Was a very real thing for me and my family. And I really wanted to be out on the streets, and a part of that movement. It was very important to me. At the same time, I was looking on the TV and I was seeing police officers having bottles and other things thrown at them, and people screaming at them, people cursing at them. And a lot of my really good friends, people I know, are in law enforcement, and it's a community that I have a real relationship with. And I'm looking at each of those people and I'm saying, they're somebody's kid, they have kids, they're somebody's brother or sister. And, I had a real problem with that. And I said, look, if I want to go out and I want to be a part of this protest, but I also want to show my support to these guys doing this. And what I've really found with policing in America right now, I've just spent like the last month with the people in the Baltimore police, and nobody is more disgusted and outraged, I think, with the corruption and the brutality and the savagery of bad police than good police.
Oh, I know.
Like there's an oath that a peacemaker makes to the community that they live in, which is that they'll put their life on the line for the good of the community. My friend Jerry Ballesteros, career LAPD in Newton down in South Central, he was, he's been there 20 years. They used to give him coffee and invite him into the restaurants, and now they're spitting in it and telling him he's not welcome anymore. And who is that hurting? That's hurting the people in his community.
It's hurting everybody. And I think you raise a really good point. And I do too also have people I love in law enforcement. And I think and it's funny, I teach a class at Sidwell now called the DMV, and it's basically just complicating everything for the kids. And it was so fun because they just...
The DMV, like the DMV or the Department of Motor Vehicles?
No,
the DMV, okay.
DC, Maryland, Virginia.
Yeah.
So Robbie Gross and I taught it, and I had my friend from this leadership program come, and he did a lesson for them on affordable housing. And we touched on how affordable housing is key for recidivism, to keep recidivism down. And they got to talk to one of the residents at this housing facility, and one of the kids asked him, so what do you think about defund the police? And he was like, I think it's idiotic. And, this is a black man that's been put away for 20 years, and now he's back. And the kids were totally floored. They didn't understand that. I was like, you have to understand, like this is real life for them. Like his neighborhood would be dangerous without the police. And I think all of this, it's the polarity thing.
Yep.
We are increasingly unable to hold two truths in this at one time. Yes, there are bad police and there are good police. There is systemic racism and there are people fighting against it. There are some good things in critical race theory, and there might be some things that you disagree with. That doesn't mean you throw the whole thing out.
100%.
You know what I mean? And people are increasingly finding it difficult to take one piece of something and one piece of something else and one piece of something else and hold that in their hand. They have to have just one thing and it has to be perfect, and that's unrealistic. That's not life.
Of course, but you can't vilify an entire race of people, a profession of people like that. I mean, I think, so I guess what I'm getting, so is that your biggest frustration, that things have to either be all good or all bad? Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm really trying to get people to sit in the mess where two things that seem totally different might actually be true.
What is your sword to not even fight your way out of the mess, but fight your way through the mess? Like, it's, to me, my hunch is it's the sensitivity and the grandstanding and the throwing up optics on this way. So I'm like on both sides. You can't tell me anything because I'm pretty sure is the enemy.
It is. And a very wise woman named Loretta Ross, she's a professor at Smith College. And she wrote this article in the New York Times called Calling in a Calling Out Culture. And she graciously talked to me for an hour. Like, I just emailed her out of the blue. And Kat Dawson put me in touch with her. But anyway, she's like, calling out is the enemy. That's not how you get anything done.
Straight up.
You know what I mean? Like, you have to, if somebody does something wrong, you call them in and tell them, hey, this was really insensitive and this is why. And I really, I respect you and I appreciate you, and I don't think that you did that on purpose, but you hurt me. Right, and you hurt me. And like, people can't do that. They have to do it behind Facebook or behind their tweet or whatever. And it's like calling people out and getting them fired. And that doesn't do anything but make you an enemy.
Or make you afraid to say how you feel or have the conversation in the first place.
And then that person goes and like, you know what, I can't say anything, I don't want to say anything. So they don't engage. I can't work with you if you don't engage.
That's right.
So like I told, the people at Sidwell, like, my goal is to broaden the scope of EJC, because we have the gung-ho equity people, and then we have the people that aren't so sure. And people are so quick to say, oh, they're racist, they're part of the resistance. Like, stop. Okay. If they're part of the resistance, they still work at the school and they still teach the children. And so we have to bring them in somehow. And you can't bring them in by wiping them off.
But generalizations and racism is generalization. It's the same shit. So if you say these people are all this way, or these people are, it's like, you can't do that shit. You just can't do that shit.
You can't. And we have to get more comfortable having a conversation with someone and finding one thing that we connect on. And then you go and you recoup, because some of those conversations are hard. They take a lot of energy. And we agreed on this, we disagree on this, fine. I still respect you as a person. And be able to move on. And it's gotten so far apart where people just don't have the skills to do that. And that's part of what we have to focus on, is not necessarily, yes, the ideology, but the skills to have a conversation, the skills to think critically about something, the skills to be able to hold two things in the same space that might contradict each other.
And the hunger, the hunger to be challenged, the hunger to be like, I can learn from you. We are so different. Just explain to me, first of all, like, what led you to football and what do you love about the game?
Football is the best sport ever. It's the greatest team sport. I will argue anybody down.
How so?
You cannot win the game just with one player.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And everybody has to pitch in. If the O-line doesn't block for the quarterback ain't doing shit.
That's right.
You know, if the linebackers don't, fill in those, like, nobody can do anything without the other person. And just like for me personally, football and contact sports, I think for women are essential.
How so?
As girls, we're not socialized to rough and tumble and roll around with people like boys are. But the act of hitting another person gives you a confidence over your body, your physical body, that I don't think you get in other ways. And that's important. All the statistics show, even just sport, not just contact sports, but sports in general, girls that play sports are less likely to get sexually assaulted, all of those things. But it gives you a power over your body that's like unmatched. And because I remember my first hit, right? Claudia Hogan hit me.
Yeah. What was that? That was in pro football?
Yeah.
And explain that.
Oh my God. So we had this blocking drill. And I was fast. Like Claudia is, as we always say, Claudia's raised by wolves.
Yeah.
And she, we just had to block and she hit me and I was like, oh. I was like, okay. I think I know what I have to do now.
Yeah. Because, and what is it? What did you have to do?
You have to throw yourself at another person.
Straight up.
And go for blood.
Yeah.
And then it's so fucking addictive.
Yeah.
And it just feels so good.
Tell me about you as a player.
My strength is I like to hit. But I didn't really get to play defense. I got to play kickoff team, which I loved, even though we would beat everybody like 75-0. And nobody likes a blowout except me, because I always got to go down and hit the person. But they put me at receiver. I was fast. I had to learn the skill. I can run in a straight line. The other things take a little bit of practice. And so at first I could catch the ball, but I couldn't stay on my feet. So every time I caught the ball, I would fall.
Yeah.
And then I got the hang of it. And I was still the shy Natalie. And then one day in Erie, Pennsylvania, we were playing the team. And I think it was Brian Mitchell. He was like our honorary coach for that year or something.
Okay.
And he was like, put her on kickoff team.
Wow. And Brian Mitchell, legend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because they make her the gunner. And I went down and I hit the girl, like she just caught the ball and wow.
Yeah.
And then she started to cry.
Damn.
And I was like, I'm so sorry. And then it was just so wonderful. And every time we scored, I was like, yes, we scored. We're on kickoff,
Yeah. About to go hit somebody.
But it was everything I needed to pull me out of that shy, unconfident person that Sidwell had kind of created, and it was learning how to be confident in your person.
But what made you what was that decision in the first place? Why were you like, yo, I'm gonna try for a professional football team?
Because I loved football. I would watch it all the time. And I can't tell you why. I don't remember when I started liking football. I would just like watching it.
How did being a player influence you as a coach and vice versa? How did it inform your coaching?
I mean, the skills that I picked up, I tried to put onto, the kids I was coaching. And then the other thing is that I knew one position really when they hired me. And they were like, but you can organize. So I was the organizer and I had to hire people who knew more. And then I started to learn. And I was a teacher. I know how to teach kids. I know how to teach people things. And so football is just another thing.
But I guess the thing is, and obviously you've talked about, there's such a fascination because it's a woman in football and football is what it is. And now that's that's just starting to kind of break through in a more major way. And you were a pioneer there. But I guess being a woman, how did that help, if it did? And how did it make it harder?
I think it helped, hopefully, and you can ask Quinn this for his opinion. They respected me, and they knew that I loved them. And the kids are always easy, right? It's the adults that give you most problems. Because kids just want to do well, and so if they see that you're about them and you're not bullshitting, because they have a very accurate bullshit meter, then they're fine. The adults have all the preconceived everything and whatnot. And so I had more problems with adults than ever had with
Problems that you would have had being a head football coach, period, or because you were a woman?
because I was a woman.
And what were those?
Just the offhand comment, like this stupid ass comments. People riding the wave at first, and then after that, like it gets old. Like okay, like you're not. I guess maybe it's a resentment. I don't really know where it came from. And not being treated the same. There wasn't anything like, I don't even remember, but it's the comments and the way people viewed you, and the way they listened to you or not, or like, oh, that's nice, thanks for saying that, but and then if you actually knew what you're talking about, oh, and then what I found was that many football coaches don't actually know what the fuck they're talking about. Like football is not rocket science, and people think just because you have a penis, like you automatically know all things about football. It is not rocket science. Anybody can learn football and then teach it to someone. And that was the part that was always like funny to me, that people were, oh my God, how do you do this? And I'm like, I can read. I can see. Being able to communicate effectively within an all-male environment was going to be important. It's not about me. It's about them. If I'm going to step into this, I need to make sure that I do everything that I can to make sure that they have a positive experience.
And what did you want for them more than anything else as their football coach?
I wanted football to not be it for them. I didn't want football to be their last resort. I wanted, which is the stereotype, and I didn't want it to be
like a way out or a ticket.
Their way out. I wanted them to know that they were just as wonderful and fine and capable, regardless of football.
So how do you do that?
Make them go to class, and stay on them about their academics.
And you had mandates on your team, right? What were your mandates?
They had to go to study hall. They had to get a certain GPA. They had to fill out their little card every day. The teacher signed the card. And if they skip study hall, they can't come to practice.
Straight up.
Or they skip my class. I remember the coaches shook their head at me. They were like, you sat your starting quarterback, Jamie. And I was like, yeah, he skipped my class. He can't play. But, because at the end of the day, this shit isn't important. High school football, most of them aren't going to play, in the NFL. We had one kid, Sticks, made it to the practice squad of the Texans. And I took a picture of the screen when he was on there in preseason. And he's not in the NFL anymore. You know what I mean?
Right.
But they've graduated and they are thinking about other careers. And, that is important for me, for them to have options, for them to have experiences. If they stayed with the team, they all went through the college process and were admitted into a college or university.
That's amazing.
So they applied and were admitted. There, financial aid and all the things that are different monsters, and some started a little later than others, but they all tried it and did it. You know what I mean? And or some post-secondary, like we have a few firefighters.
You're still a part of many of these kids' lives.
I try to be, and I'm closer to some than others, but like if they call, I'm gonna do what I can.
There was also part of your career where you were Title IX administrator, and where were you successful? Where weren't you? What were your frustrations there? What are the things that you're proud of with that?
I'm proud of. We looked at a lot of data. We were able to get data from the school, so I had to. DC has this law that you have to collect all this data in athletic programs. People kind of didn't think it was going to work. Like, I had to train coaches and athletic directors about gender equity. So again, mostly male clientele, and having to appeal to them about something that, a lot of people would rather not think about.
And what was the status of like DC public high school women's sport? Like, because you came from a school where women's sports were, I mean.
It was, I mean, across the country, girls of color have met far fewer opportunities to play sports than other girls. And that is primarily because they don't get it early, because early sports are usually pay to play. And so folks that don't have the means don't get to play. And then by the time they're in high school, girls, you know, if they haven't had the experience, they're not really going to try it in those adolescent years where they're trying to fit in and they're trying to be boys, you know, so the time to get it is when they're young, and really bringing awareness to that and giving as many opportunities as we could in high school. And a lot of it is, you know, some of it's funding, but some of it was honestly the kids didn't want to play. You know, you would start a volleyball program, it'd be hard to get 8 girls. Really working with the nonprofits in the area like DC Youth Rugby, Winners Lacrosse, DC Scores, you know, that bring kids into those sports at a young age and fuel that spark in them to play. Because you see just how beneficial sports are. Like for women, 94% of women in the C-suite have played a sport. So high-powered women, majority of them have played a sport. Wow. And then 54% of them have played a collegiate sport.
Wow. Of what, women where?
In the C-suite, like, so CEOs, CFO, like.
What do you call it, C-suite?
Yeah.
I don't even know what that was. I was like, the C-suite? Y'all know what the C-suite is? Yeah, I didn't know what the C-suite was.
Well, sorry. Okay,
no, you good.
But yeah, I mean, and.
But see, you know what I mean? That's, you gotta listen, everyone. You know what I'm saying? So not, okay. That makes sense.
You know what I mean? And that's huge for women. Straight gender up. Equity in corporate America. Like, sports is huge. Yeah. And so if you have such a disparity in girls of color starting at a young age, you're gonna see that disparity up there too. And so that's why it's so important.
What is your take on this big debate going around now about transgender biologically born men playing in women's sports?
I mean, I think, so it's different in high school, right, than it is in professional. I'm gonna deal with high school and middle school. Let the kids play what they want. And people act like, you know, all these boys are gonna just say they're transgender so that they can play women's sport. That's not true. No boy, a teenage boy, is gonna come out and say I'm transgender just because. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, with the stigma and everything, nobody's gonna do that. And the amount of times that this happens is very, very statistically small. Mm-hmm. So there's that. Like, I believe when they're that age, let them do what they want. And it's not that big of a deal.
Even in high school?
Yeah. I mean, it's not that many of them. And they talk about, oh, well, the boys, you have just as much variability within the genders sometimes as you do across the genders. You have a little frail little boy.
Straight up. And you have grown-ass man. You coach high school football. Right. There are men and boys on the same. Exactly. They're two different species.
Exactly.
That is fair.
But, you know, we look at this as such an injustice, and I just don't think it's that serious for the high schoolers. And then when you get to professional, fine, make a testosterone level for which, you know, you can perform at this or the other. And we've also got to look at our binary culture as it is. You know, we live in a binary gendered culture, a Western dominant culture. Mm-hmm. There are many indigenous cultures that are not binary, and they have third genders, and they it's a thing, and they have words for that. So this is a very Western construct. Mm-hmm. And it's a small percentage, you know, and I think that being transgender is real. You know, feeling like you should be something else is real. And who are we to tell somebody that that's not true and that they should, you know, just be banned from doing this thing? And you can do it. You can look at it case by case, right? Like, we had a biological boy who was identified as non-binary, played football, also played volleyball. Oh, there's no volleyball for boys in the East Coast, mm-hmm. you know? Mm-hmm. So non-binary, the child can play what they want. The person who brought it didn't want to file. I was like, fine, file a complaint, but you have to put your name on it. They didn't want to do that. And so, right. And And I was like, if it's such a big deal, well, other kids might do that. No, they won't. Teenage kids are not going to put themselves through scrutiny, necessary scrutiny just to play on a girls' team. Who's going to do that?
I feel you on that. And I think maybe what this question is about just the state of youth sports in general. And that it's like from the young, my son Bill was walking around with shit in his diaper 3 years ago. And now he's playing travel baseball with his name on the back, playing like 600 games a year. And people are taking it so seriously.
And
like
that's
they're going
a problem.
It's a big ass problem. And I think these things are really related. And I agree with that. And if you can fix that, maybe you can fix the other. That being said, as you know, for so many of these people and for so many of these folks, whether we agree with it or not, sports is a ticket to, I mean, sports is a ticket to the university level. Sports is a ticket out, or even if you're just, not even a ticket out, but it's attaining a college scholarship is a serious thing. And there are just fundamental differences between men and women. And if you're losing, and I hear you, I don't know that if I can get down with your notion that it's just such a small number, because that don't even mean anything. That's just where we're at now. That's just like, you know what I mean? Like anything like that, I think you have to look at as like, are we saying this is okay? Because why can't you play boys soccer and identify as a woman? But like you're playing with the gender that you were born into because that's your physical makeup, and it's equity. You know what I mean? But right, I'm just wondering, like, what would be, like, what is the, you can still be whoever you are.
I think we have to adapt. I think this is one of the things that it's ingrained in our particular culture, and we're gonna have to adapt in both directions. I think that, we're gonna have to think outside of the box. I don't think the solution is in the structure that we have right now. And that's part of that mess, right? We have to look at me as a woman, because a transgender person, they are the opposite sex, right? If you tell me as a woman to go play boys soccer, I don't want to do that. I'm not a boy, right? And so that we are going to have to really look at where we can meet somewhere out of where we are right now. I don't know the answer, and I agree. Like if populations increase and in terms of transgender folks in playing sports, I mean, we'll have to look at it. But I don't think just forcing people to be into something that they really are not is right.
Look, I think there's no question a lot of this is just the fundamentalism and the insanity that goes around youth sports and how tied into economics that is right now. And I'm with you on that.
And they are talking about, certain parameters to playing. Like if you are a transgender girl, which means a biological boy, and who identifies as female, there are some parameters where you have to start hormone therapy before you can play in a certain sport, right? So they're starting to think outside of the box with those sort of parameters, professionally testing a testosterone, because you also have intersex people. That Olympian, she's intersex.
Straight up.
So she has both.
Yeah.
But she identifies more as woman, and then, what is that level of testosterone that would put somebody in here? And maybe it is just measuring, having categories based on testosterone level and not on what your identified gender is. Like,
But I would also say there might be, the part of the issue might be also, like what you just said, I identify as a woman, I don't want to play boys soccer, but, well, why not? Like I also, like, why not?
I mean, it's like, I'm doing this thing for my mom about prosthetics and orthotics. It's like giving a black person a white leg and saying it's still a leg. Like, no, but it's not me. It doesn't look like me. Why should I have to conform to this because you don't have something to? So it's more about that person's identity and that being recognized, rather than, can they play on the boys team? Sure. But do I want to, if I'm a woman and I'm, forced to be on this boys team, I have to go in their locker room, no, I don't want to do that.
Well, why would you have to go in their locker room?
I mean, you wouldn't.
You know what I'm saying? You wouldn't have to. But I feel you. I feel you.
Like,
I do.
I'm just talking about, like, the notion of being transgender is more about their sense of identity that's deep in their soul, and not just a technicality that, oh, you can just do this. That's what, not to say that that couldn't happen, but that would be, from what I've learned from transgender folks that I know of, it's a matter of just that being them. I have a teammate who is now using male pronouns, right? So he just a few years ago was identified as she, but always felt like, this isn't right. This isn't right. And like he called me, he's like, I'm gonna use he, him. And I was like, good for you. And he's not playing any sports or anything, but he hasn't gone through any of the hormone therapy or anything like that. But that he is so much more comfortable now, just as a person.
That's beautiful.
Right?
That's beautiful. And like,
it's hard.
It's hard. And that's why we need to have these conversations, because there's nothing that I think matters more. What a beautiful, time that we're on the cusp of like getting to these places and to live in a country where that's possible. And like, there's nothing I want more than for your friend to be who he is, but I would never agree with like, and I think that if he wants to continue to play on the Divas, he should be able to.
And it's something that we need to think about and talk about and have parameters that make sense and that honor people's humanity. This is not just a technicality for people. This is their humanity, and whatever we do and however we talk about it, we need to honor that. So I don't have the answers. And when we get to do older and we deal with money and we deal with, scholarships and things, we need to put some parameters in place, and that's okay.
And we got to be able to have these conversations without everybody getting all twisted up about it.
Exactly. You can't just shut it down, and cancel this person or that person because they said this or that. That doesn't get us anywhere. No. It just gets two sides that don't agree, and then and nobody has a good experience. So.
I appreciate you, homie.
I appreciate you.
Come on, Quinn. Come on in here, man. What's going on, man?
Not much, man. Thank you.
Yeah,
man.
Do you
have a thingy? Oh.
He got that lob. So, Quinn, man, how are you, bro?
I'm good.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. What have you thought about just this conversation that we've had with Nat so far?
Well, if we backtrack to the beginning, everything that she's been saying right now, it resonates with me, because I get to experience it firsthand. And I'm just like you are grateful for the way that you grew up. I'm grateful for this experience because not a lot of people get to, I guess, exit that environment and come into a new, unusual environment that, is beneficial for them. So, I can't complain.
And when did you first meet? What do you call her, by the way?
Randolph.
You call her Randolph?
Yeah.
You always call her Randolph?
Always called her Randolph.
Not Coach Randolph, not Mrs. Just Randolph.
Randolph,
And when did you first meet her?
She was my 9th grade environmental science teacher, so I had to be about 15.
What did you think the first time you heard that she was going to be your football coach?
A lot of people resented the idea, but I think that history that we already had established with her, like she said earlier, established that respect at the same time and that trust.
Did you know anything about her as a football player? Like, did you think
never
you didn't know she played?
Didn't even know she coached prior to us.
And did you have, did you feel like she had any knowledge about the game of football?
I didn't care about it because, to be honest with you, I wasn't knowledgeable about football. I was acting off pure instincts, and I just was an athlete, like I said. So I just went out and performed. I left the whole mental thing to them, and so I didn't look at it from that perspective.
No hesitation. No. Everybody was down with it.
Yeah, they held press conferences and everything, and we were right by her side, smiling and just supporting her.
And what were those first practices like? Like, what did you think of her as a coach? Your first impressions?
Intense.
How so?
It's just good. Like she fit in. It didn't seem like she had to go through a buffer period, to get used to it. It was just like natural for her. And
she wasn't trying to prove herself.
It wasn't. Yeah, it was just she fit right in. Everything went smooth. Yeah, from my memory.
From your memory. And did you ever see her play football?
Never.
Never?
So I met her when I was in the 9th grade, and I've never seen her before in my life.
And how were you guys?
Us or me?
You. How were you? How was the team?
The team, in my opinion, when we reflect on it now, and apparently we weren't that good if we compare ourselves to people outside of the DC area. But when I was in that bubble, there
They
was
were
no one that
good.
could touch us.
They were good.
You were real good. You guys went to the Turkey Bowl.
Yeah.
And you said in there that she was just lucky that she got a whole bunch of athletes.
Yeah, really. Yeah. Like there's so many schools in the DC area that just sucked.
Yep.
And to stumble upon, and I won't say stumble, but
No, I mean, yeah, y'all were
it was
there.
all like on both sides of the football. We were deep. Just talented. So
That first 2 or 3 classes, they had a lot of athletes that were already there. We had brought a few in, but I wasn't big on recruiting. But we just tried to steer them as best we could. But they were good.
And looking back on it, what was Nat's strengths as a coach? And what were her weaknesses?
consistency, and I would say her strengths, they were off the football field.
Like what?
Yeah, like we realized what was important because of her. Academics, like the football thing. Like she said, this may not be your way out, so you need to start thinking about other things. You are good right now, but it only goes so far. So I think her, giving us that different perspective was extremely important. I grew up in foster care, and every month I would have like a social worker come to my house and just check in. And this is around the time where I had graduated from high school, went to school on a football scholarship, and came back. And, I just needed help. I needed support. And my social worker was trying to relay that to my guardian. So I invited Randolph to one of my meetings one time just for the heck of it, just so she could see like what it is that I actually go through. And, my aunt, she was just going off like I'm not helping him. My guardian was, my social worker was trying to get her to understand like, hey, you got to understand what you have here in Quentin. Like, he's different than most males around here. He actually wants to do something. He actually wants to get out, but he needs help doing it, And she stopped the whole meeting and she looked at me. She said, "You come to live with me." Simple as that. And I packed my bags up and, moved in the basement.
Wow. And how long?
That was 2014.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then I left for the military the next year.
Wow. What do you think changed while you were living there?
It provided me with like the hope that I can do more. Because, growing up in an environment that, I came from, I only see people that are like me. I only see people, in society's eyes that are failures. So how can I aspire, or hope to be more than what it is that I see on a daily basis? So when, I went into her home and I see how she lives, she showed me the other side. I met her friends. And I'm like, oh, okay, now it starts to click. So, just perspective and just, a different lens, like I spoke on earlier.
He was the quiet one that you didn't want to fuck with. And a few people figured that out. And he, he always says, people always think I'm mean because he just has his own, the face he puts on and he's chilling. And he used to always come and check him. Randolph, did you eat? And I'm like, no, I haven't eaten yet.
I ain't had no money, but
somewhere you would
gesture
get Chick-fil-A or whatever he had, he would give me some, and just that this kid would think of me like that. And like coaching was hard for me. I was very depressed. Went to therapy, antidepressants, the whole bit. And
mostly because of the unbelievable time commitment. What?
I think it was just a perfect storm. My father passing in the way that he did, and just everything, and having to. All of your insecurities are put on blast for the whole world. So that was kind of, and it was. I was really stressed out about making sure that I was making a good experience for them. Like that really weighed on me. And there were some really dark times. And the thought of him is what got me through. Like, I can't check out of here. Like, what's that going to say to him? And reflecting back in terms of like how did being a woman maybe help them, I think the respect thing, like seeing just like you seeing a powerful black man and Mr. Williams, them seeing a woman to be respected, makes it normal for them to respect a woman. And then like there were the wonderful times like singing Adele, Someone Like You, in the
That's
car
my jam right there.
and in the office, like they used to belt it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God, only a female, like what have I done to
my
this
song.
voice? But I mean, those were the beautiful times. I mean, they literally, like they printed out the words and everything. But you know, so yeah, I think that just being authentically you, whatever that might be, is the lesson. And that's how people all the time questioning me, how do you get them to respect you? Like, how do you get somebody to respect you? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, what kind of question is that? Or are you going to tackle your players? Would you ask Tony Dungy that?
What coach?
Like, what coach tackles their players? Why are you asking me that? But it's the same thing, like, even now, talking about how women in sports are treated by the media and how, especially black women, the double standard, like for Serena versus other tennis players and the questions that they ask us. I experienced that firsthand. I'm like, this is a dumb fucking question.
Yeah.
Are you going to wear a skirt to the field? What?
What? Yeah.
So it's like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, they don't do that anymore. I mean, Callie, Jennifer, and Lo are exactly who they are, and they are NFL coaches that have been in the playoffs. You know, and so I'm just glad that we got there. We got there quick.
You did. Straight
We
up.
got there quick.
Straight up.
10 years.
Yeah. Matt, thank you.
John.
Thank you. That was awesome, y'all.
This is fun.
Yeah, I really appreciate you guys.
I didn't know it was gonna be all this.
Yeah. That's what's up. Thanks for being here, everybody. I really appreciate it. If you dug what you saw and you want to hear more, subscribe, like, do all that stuff. It'd mean a lot to us. I hope you dig these episodes as much as we dig doing them. You guys take care of yourself.